In. One of the highlights of this year's Melbourne Documentary Film Festival is a film called The Longer You Bleed. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking to the director of the film, live from Berlin, Ewan Waddell. Ewan, welcome to Movie Metropolis.
Thank you for having me.
Great to talk to you. And this is such a devastating documentary about Ukrainian people who have fled their country because of the bombings and their reactions and feelings and so on about it. How did it all come about?
Well, it fell together in a very organic way. It's probably the of all the projects of film creative projects or otherwise that I've ever been involved in. This is one which um, emerged very naturally. Like it's a very personal project that started in conversations and just observing the conversations about obviously not just the war in Ukraine and everything that's going on around it, but the way that we're consuming it, the way that algorithms are playing a role in, the emotional relationship we have to this war and the kind of political implications that that have. And so I live in Berlin. I've lived here for the past few years, and when the full-scale invasion broke out, there was a lot of displaced Ukrainians who, mainly women, just because of the gender-based conscription thing, that were escaping to Berlin. And I wanted to do something to help, so I started just for a magazine I was working for, interviewing Ukrainian women who were coming to Berlin to kind of share their stories and hopefully, gather some donations and attention around them. And one of the women I interviewed is now my partner, and we have a child together. And but around that time, we were getting to know each other, and so I was immediately, this is the first half of 2022, and I was immediately around her a lot and a bunch of other Ukrainians who were just going through this very obviously very traumatic experience of being aware of the war going on in their country, but also a kind of absurd and bizarre experience of this awful reality being mediated amidst a sea of very trivial images, and upon this like very commercially infrastructure platform of Instagram or like also Telegram for more news-based stuff. And I was just noticing how bizarre this was, and how also the kind of numbness that I feel. Well, and this is one of the arguments that I try to make with the film, is that I think the intense, overwhelming nature of communication, especially image-based communication of these wars and these realities on these platforms, I think creates a kind of numbness, and then this very mundane way of talking about the most awful things and this mundane way of consuming them. Like you just go about your daily life whilst you've just seen the hospital which you were born in just blown up, or learned that like your cousin has been killed, and then you just have to, I mean, that's just all the information, but then you're just seeing these things. Like the street that you grew up on is like this debris everywhere because a missile just hit it, and you're just seeing that in like HD. And so I was just noticing this, also the fact that it wasn't being talked about, not just the fact that within the Ukrainian community people were just, it was such a mundanity, but the fact that the intense way that Ukrainians and of course like anyone who's connected to a war or crisis absorbs this information through social media, through these kind of algorithms, and these like amidst like people drinking a coffee in a cafe or just come back from the club, and then you swipe across and it's like a dead child. And I didn't feel like this conversation was happening so much, especially not in long form. And so Luba and I together decided to start kind of investigating this and trying to contribute to this conversation. So I was interviewing her and discussing this topic, and then we started interviewing her friends around her. And then as we got deeper into the topic, we and just just the nature of the role that images play in this, the role that algorithms play in this, we decided to travel to Ukraine And we didn't have a structure for a film, but in the end, this investigation found itself into like kind of a filmic structure, and it's a bizarrely structured thing, but yeah, we also just thought about different ways to represent it audio visually, and so um, in a kind of experimental way, because as much as we can do interviews and have this journalistically driven investigation, it's there's things that images and sounds can say, and these audiovisual experiences can evoke that words can't. And so we just thought of different ways to represent this in a filmic sense, and then that's how the kind of film came about.
Okay, well, that's a great explanation, and this is such an impressive look at the way some people react, and in fact, the title "The Longer You Bleed" sort of leads to that notion of desensitization. That the more you witness, or you experience, or you feel the horrors of what has been going on, the less likely you are to feel or react or deal with those situations. You want to go off onto social media or go off elsewhere to forget about it or to not think about it or to talk about the absurdity. That word comes up a lot in the film. So it's really interesting the way you do that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Like desensitization is this very, very key thing to it, and it's almost a catch-22 when it comes to, the representation of conflict and crisis. Because in the simplistic sense, you hope that if you communicate this awful reality, like the more you do it, then the more people will know, and then the more people will, either take action or pressure their governments to take action. And yeah, and then everything will be good. But then the unfortunate reality is, in some senses, the more that you communicate these things, the more that you talk about these things, the less people care. And so it just raises questions about the way that the way the media landscape works, and how we can actually have like a meaningful impact, and translate, like, talking about these things into down the line supporting the topics. And so I think what one of the questions which emerged from this investigation, is how should we be exploring like new approaches of image making or of documenting things that can bypass this desensitization, and if so, what? Because I mean it's yeah.
Yeah. No, no, fair enough, fair enough. And I'm so glad you explore it. How easy was it to get the various people, mostly women, as you say, to talk to camera about their experiences and participate in the film?
Uh, Very easy. We didn't have any difficulty with that. I mean, people want to support. I mean, people were very grateful, to be honest. That was the overwhelming kind of experience, that people were just like thanking us for talking about this, because it wasn't being talked about enough. So we didn't even there's a couple that's interviewed, and this is in Ukraine, when we were there, and it's a couple who initially they were just friends of Luba, my partner, who's also the producer and protagonist of the film. And when we were in Ukraine, we wanted to visit some of the sites of destruction in the Kiev region, and they weren't planning. It wasn't the intention for them to be in the film, but when we were just talking to them throughout the day, they kind of offered, like, do you want? We have some things to say. Like, do you want us to interview us? And it ended up being like a very striking interview, and very powerful moments, some of the things that they said. But yeah, I mean, people from our experience were just very eager to contribute to this conversation, and just talk as much as possible about it.
Okay. Oh, how interesting and well done on all of that. And also, I must commend you on the extraordinary footage that you did shoot in Ukraine, as well as other footage that you've put together in the film. It's just mind-boggling what's been happening
Thank
to the
you.
people there.
Yeah, yeah. Like, it's. I mean, yeah. One of the things that struck me when I was there and like creating images, because I'd never seen things like that with my own eyes myself. you see so much of this stuff, like all through your life in movies or news or whatever, of just destruction. And I guess I didn't really think about how I would feel when I actually saw it with my own eyes beforehand, but it was surreal to, particularly there's this one bridge, which is in the Kiev region, and it was actually, from what I understand, blown up by the Ukrainian forces themselves to prevent the Russian like incursion into Kiev. And it's just like very striking thing to stand there and see a huge bridge, which is just like the just fallen down in the middle, and it's like going through a river, and it's just your mind just can't process it.
Mm.
It's just like physically there. It was like I was watching something through a screen almost. Like it wasn't real. It's just these things. I just yeah. I'm still kind of processing that, and I didn't see the most intense stuff myself. But yeah, all we could do at that point is just like try and document things as much as we could.
Yeah, oh, it is extraordinary and well done on that. So, with all of the interviews, the footage is shot in Ukraine and so on. How easy was the editing process to get it down to the 72 minutes that we see in the film?
That was really difficult, to be honest, because as I say, like it was the production process was a very organic investigation. We didn't have, I mean, naturally documentaries anyway, you can have a script and a framework, but things unfold as they unfold. But this, even more so than most, I would say, with this, we didn't exactly know what we were looking for. We were trying to just investigate the topic and just document what felt right in the moment and follow these threads. And so that ended up with a lot of footage of different things and a difficulty to kind of structure a specific narrative that would make sense throughout, because there's so much to talk about in this topic, and obviously the kind of partly inside of me wants to talk a lot about the awful nature of like the Russian full-scale invasion, and be very condemning and transparent about the human costs of the war. And we, of course, we do talk about that, but it was, yeah, that was a kind of difficult kind of ethical tension in the documentary, because we also need to make a film which has a very specific narrative, and it's very specific to this concept and this investigation, and it's not just purely spotlighting the awful nature of Russia's war crimes. And so it did take quite a lot of time, and I was like coming back to it here and there over several months and taking breaks from it to kind of process stuff. And then we were also like I was editing stuff, and then we were shooting new stuff, so the production and the editing was kind of one and the same towards the end, because also, as you said, one of the core themes is desensitization and compassion fatigue. And so it was necessary for us to we don't just shoot everything in 3 weeks or a month or something, but to return to the topic and check in with this kind of arc of compassion fatigue. And I think that's kind of, it became a kind of core part of the process for the editing to be quite extended.
Of course, I fully understand how interesting to hear all that. And um, I was just wondering, as I was watching your film, were there any particular films or filmmakers that maybe inspired you in your approach to making The Longer You Bleed?
Um, Good question. There's none which I could draw a direct line to,
Hmm.
but the ones which come to my mind right now, I'm thinking of Sebastian Junger, Tim Hetherington, and I mean Richard Moss. He's more of like a photographer, artist, filmmaker, but yeah, I mean Richard Moss is like an enduring inspiration for me. He's this British like documentary photographer, and he does a lot of documentation of conflict, but particularly in unique and experimental ways, such as to kind of bypass desensitization. Like, for instance, he has this, perhaps his most memorable series is called Enclave, I think. shot in the Congo, and he uses this expired military film stock, which turns chlorophyll in plants pink. And so I think for some reason it was like some military technology that was helpful for them to identify stuff. But it results in images where like the green in like army uniforms, and then the green in these like hills and grass and leaves, all of that turns pink, and it's these like beautifully haunting images of the conflict in the Congo. Just the experimental nature of his documentation there brought a lot more attention to the conflict, just in that visibility sense, but also what it says on a more deeper conceptual level, about the invisibility of certain wars and conflicts in the world. I think is quite interesting. So yeah, in a kind of conceptual sense, it's artists like him which influenced it. But and then I would say maybe like Sebastian Junger, who's like anthropologist, war journalist, filmmaker, who has captured the kind of lesser discussed psychological side effects of being in war and crisis.
Okay, okay. All very interesting links and and filmmakers. Now, apart from screening at the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival, which I'm sure audiences will appreciate here in Melbourne, I see that the film has screened elsewhere at a number of places. Where has it screened, and what reactions have you received?
No, we've only had one screening so far. Our premiere at Hot Docs in Toronto. We
Ah,
have a few other screenings on the cards over the next months, but yeah, we just had the two screenings in Toronto, and yeah, the reactions. Yeah, people seem to have an appetite to talk about this stuff. I think it's. I think that was because, especially like this period of time now, there's even since that screening, there's been new wars and conflict in the world, in and like I think people just more and more, I think, questioning and talking about what it actually does to us to be overwhelmed with this news and to constantly look at these images, and it's like, oh, just another war. And I think yeah, it's a problem. It's a big problem that we're overwhelmed with news, and I don't have a solution to it because I mean, certain people think we're just overall we're absorbing news media, social media too much, and we should kind of switch off for it. But on this, which with social media, yeah, like that's a good solution for your mental health. But when it comes to being aware of you know a lot of suffering and crisis and wars, when there's a value for a societal awareness, such as to like pressure politicians to not instigate very wars with an awful human cost, then yeah, you can't just switch off to that stuff. So I think it's a really complex and difficult question. And the experience of the screening was that a lot of people are feeling the same way. There's a big Ukrainian community in Toronto, so we're in Canada broadly. So we're happy to have a good amount of Ukrainians come and yeah, appreciate the representation and feel that like a kind of solidarity that they're feeling, that their experiences were being represented. And of course, like for me as a director, like I'm not Ukrainian and I'm not from a country or a culture at war, so I was nervous for that yeah, it would be something that's not representative. But the fact that it went the other direction is something that means a lot.
it certainly does. And by saying that you're not from a country that's war torn or whatever, it does mean that you have an objective view of the impact that the situation in Ukraine has. So, in some respects, that's a stronger voice because you don't have an axe to grind in particular.
True, yeah, true point.
Yeah. Well, Ewan, congratulations on the film. It really is remarkable. Are you working on another film project at the moment?
Well, thank you for saying that. And yeah, we're actually developing another film right now. I was just having a meeting with some producers this morning. We're fundraising. It's coincidentally also, well, not coincidentally, but also on the topic of Ukrainian trauma. We are uh, looking to we're documenting emerging new mental health innovations in Ukraine, particularly psychedelic assisted therapies or psychedelic assisted adjacent therapies like MDMA, psilocybin, ketamine, and the fact that there's a kind of core group of very motivated researchers and advocates in Ukraine right now who are really pushing the boundaries of innovating these therapies as well as advocating for the medicalization of them in the midst of this, generational war. And it's like a fascinating topic and a fascinating story. But in terms of the artistic approach to it, we're looking to shoot a lot of it on thermal imaging cameras and military technologies because I think, I mean, and this project kind of, the visual language for this new project very much emerged from The Longer You Bleed, because as I was saying before, like we came away with questions like how can we develop new approaches to image making that can bypass desensitization. And so even though in this new film we are talking about graphic realities of PTSD and trauma and war, and we'll be shooting in Ukraine, maybe during the war, maybe not. We're trying to be as not shoot in a graphic raw way, but rather use these more spectral, thermal, ethereal, visual qualities to capture a certain essence of collective trauma. And so we can use it as access points to the emotional experience of PTSD and perhaps bypass desensitization and just talk about the topic in a new dimension. So yeah, we're thinking of it as a kind of immersive portrait of collective trauma and renewal, which speaks to the human cost, but also to this very important global conversation about mental health innovation.
Sounds powerful and great. I'm looking forward to seeing that film. That sounds like it should be really quite compelling. It's yeah, I like the way you describe it. It's fantastic stuff. Look, Ewan, congratulations. We've been speaking to Ewan Waddell, the director of The Longer You Bleed, screening this month in July at the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival. Ewan, thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Tschüss.
Cheers.
Okay. Bye bye.
Ciao, ciao.